Yo, what is up, guys? So in this video, I want to talk about how I got a job offer at Amazon as a product manager. Now, if you guys don't know this already, Amazon is a global multinational tech company, and they've got a ton of businesses everywhere. Obviously, you have Amazon.com with e-commerce. You've got AWS, which deals with cloud computing. You've got Amazon Studios, which creates a lot of content and does digital streaming. And then, of course, Lab 126, which builds a lot of the hardware devices like the Kindle, the Echo, the Dot, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of others. And then, of course, you've got machine learning and AI capabilities that they're also developing to power a lot of their services. Whether you like it or not, Amazon is here to stay. They're not going anywhere, and they are probably one of the most well-known and well-respected brands in the world. And they're here to stay. And for that reason, a lot of people want to go work there. A lot of students, ping me all the time from LinkedIn. A lot of graduates from, business schools, MBA programs also want to work there. I think Amazon has a very unique culture and a brand. And in the tech industry, it can sometimes be seen as a place where it's cutthroat and it's very difficult to collaborate and get along with your coworkers. But I also know a lot of people who've been very successful there, who've made a career out of working there. And a lot of people who come out of Amazon also say that, hey, there's a lot of value that you can learn. Even though the way that they do things is very different from everywhere else, there's a lot of value, and there's oftentimes a silver lining from that experience. So a lot of people want to work there. And so what I wanted to do in this video is kind of give you guys my story and my experience of how I think I was successful during the interview process and what ultimately led me to a job offer with them. Now, for a little bit of background and context, I'm currently a product manager. I'm not really looking for a new opportunity. This one kind of fell into my lap where the recruiter just pinged me out of the blue, I think on LinkedIn, and said, hey, there's an opportunity that's interesting within the Amazon team, specifically within kind of the data science and the hardware side. And so I just kind of opened the conversation, talked to the team, didn't know if I was going to get the role or not. But a couple of days ago, they reached out and said, hey, we want to bring you on board. So with that being said, and that for a little bit of background and context, let me kind of jump into the reasons why I think I was able to score an offer, and hopefully this can also help you guys. So the first thing that I think is really critical for getting a job at Amazon, whether you're in tech or non-tech, whether you're a product manager, marketing manager, operations, engineering, whatever that is, you really got to understand the leadership principles. Now, the leadership principles for Amazon is basically a list of 16 different principles that they've kind of developed over time. I think the list was a lot smaller, years ago. And of course, they've probably added to that because they realized, hey, there are some other unique attributes that we want to ingratiate into our culture and make sure that every Amazonian embraces these qualities. And so when you go to the website, you can see what those leadership principles are. And, even the recruiter, when they first reached out to me, they said, hey, make sure you brush up on your leadership principles, make sure you understand what they are, what they represent, and how they also relate to your job. So for example, as a product manager, if I'm going to interviewing for a product manager role, I better have some good examples of where I've been obsessed with improving the customer experience. And that's one of the first leadership principles. I don't know if these are set in a specific order or whatnot, but I'm just kind of scoring through the list. So customer obsession, it's obviously, really focusing on the customer experience and really getting that piece right. Now, a lot of companies might also embrace this into their culture and values, but for Amazon, it's definitely the first one that they list. They also talk about ownership, inventing and simplifying. They also like people who are right a lot. If you're making a lot of mistakes, tell them about an experience where you learn from it. And so a lot of the interview questions that you come across in the panel are going to be focused and built off of these leadership principles. So understanding why these leadership principles are important and why it's such a critical part of their DNA, and then being able to kind of storytell and come up with examples in your own experience, how those experiences demonstrated these leadership principles, I think is going to be a critical piece for your interview success. So I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but if you just look at them, you can kind of tell what they're looking for, and you might not agree with all of them. I think that's okay. I think some of these are probably more important than others, but just understand how your job is going to test you on these principles and make sure you have some good examples to back it up. All right, so that's the first item. Now, the second item that I think is really important for your interview process and success is to have a structured framework for telling your story. And the methodology that I personally like to use is to use the STAR framework. Now, if you go ahead and Google STAR method, you're going to get a lot of different resources. I think this article does a pretty good job of explaining what the STAR methodology is. Basically, the STAR method is very simple. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And if you can structure your story and your experiences into this framework, where literally for me, what I do is I just create a Google spreadsheet, or you can use Excel or whatever, and create a table where you have the STAR in each of the different rows, and in each column you have a different experience, and you have a sort of a high level bullet point format of, hey, what was the situation that you were in? What was the actual task that you were involved in or that you actually completed? What was the action, right? What were some of the steps or the procedures taken to solve that problem? And then, of course, what was the result? What was the impact or the value that you were able to generate from solving this problem? And, there's a lot of different methodologies out there. I personally like the STAR format, and I think this is a very sort of universal approach, not just for Amazon interviews, but for almost any tech interview. Some companies might prefer a slightly different framework, but for me, I think the STAR approach and being able to kind of summarize your experiences and success stories into this framework is going to give you a real structured way of thinking about things and organize your thoughts in a way that's very easy to track and remember, and also give you a chance to not use the same example over again, especially if you're in a panel with 5 or 6 people and you're constantly getting asked, slightly different types of questions. You don't want to use the same example over and over, right? Because they're going to think that, hey, you just don't have enough experience or you don't have enough creativity, and they might ding you for that. So make sure you have a couple of good examples. And the way that you should think about this is how each of these examples also exemplifies those leadership principles that I talked about. Now, the third thing that I think is really important for your interview success is knowing who the bar raiser is and knocking their socks off. The bar raiser at Amazon is basically someone who's a seasoned veteran. They've been at Amazon for a long time. And if you go to the website, Amazon even has a bar raiser article where they talk about, hey, what is a bar raiser? What do they do? What's their purpose? Basically, in a nutshell, right? Bar raisers have 3 key responsibilities as part of the hiring process. They're really there to assess candidates for a very specific role, and also for their long-term success of whether they're going to be successful at Amazon. And typically, the bar raiser is also someone who's not part of the immediate team of where you'll be working. They're usually someone who sits on the outside, but they're also going to be someone who's been seasoned, someone who's been at Amazon for a while. They're going to be very familiar with the interview process. And from my experience, this bar raiser is also someone who's going to go in a little bit deeper than the other panel members. They're going to double click and they're going to ask you to provide more details and more colors. And in my experience, that can be a little bit stressful. It can create a little bit of anxiety, especially if you haven't really done your due diligence and really organized your thoughts, because they will test you. And so being able to identify the bar raiser, being able to know who they are, and then impressing them during that process is going to be really important. Because if you can't get past the bar raiser, their feedback is going to go back to the hiring committee and it's not going to be good, right? So you really need to make sure that you impress the bar raiser, can identify him or her, and put your best foot forward, because that's the piece that you need to nail, right? The bar raiser is really there to up level and create a certain standard. And, you can agree with this process or not, but, they're there to also just weed out a lot of people who just aren't going to be successful long term, right? They're going to probably look at, is this person someone who's going to be successful and can adapt to that culture? Because, and like I said before, Amazon's got a very unique culture, the way they do things, the way they have their whole writing culture where everything is kind of documented in sort of a narrative format, right? They don't use a lot of PowerPoints and a lot of slide decks as tools to really convey a story or a message. And so they're going to, probably dig into that area as well. So make sure you can identify the bar raiser, and once you do, make sure that you can impress them. All right, now the fourth thing that I think is really important to getting an offer from Amazon is to have a very strong BATNA. Now, if you guys don't know what a BATNA is, let's take a look. So this article from Masterclass has one of the world's greatest negotiators, Chris Voss, who wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. I personally highly recommend it. It's probably the best book that I've ever read on negotiations. But basically, in a nutshell, what the BATNA represents is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Basically, it means, do you have leverage to negotiate? And do you have sort of a fallback or a plan B to fall back on, where you can use this as sort of an anchor point to really get what you want? And the best way to do this, obviously, is to have a job that you're in already, where you're happy, where they're treating you well. Now, of course, if you don't have that, the other best way is to have multiple offers if you can. And this is tough for a lot of people because even getting one job offer is not easy. But a lot of people who go through the interview process with a lot of tech companies, they will interview with other companies. And if you're successful and you have alternative offers and competing offers to negotiate with, then Amazon will also look at that as a favorable thing. So if you can position yourself into that area and you have multiple offers to negotiate with, that's kind of the best case scenario. But if not, make sure that you signal and articulate to the recruiting team and to your hiring manager that, hey, that you're quite happy there, that you're getting a lot of interesting projects, and that you're not desperate to leave, because they also can see that as a negative sign. If someone is just trying to get out of that situation and willing to take any type of job, that's not the message you want to send. But you really want to sort of signal that, hey, you're a high value person, someone who is highly desirable in your specific field of expertise, and that you have other options or alternatives. It's just like dating. If you put yourself out there and you're super desperate, and if you're signaling that to the person that you're trying to date, they're probably not going to be very attracted to you. So the same concept applies when you're going through the interview process. Make sure that you don't signal those attributes and really sell yourself as someone who can create a lot of value and is someone in high demand. Now, the last bit of advice I want to give you guys is to follow up with your recruiter. If you think you had a good experience, if you want to take the job and you want to see where it goes, just send them a quick email. Now, the reason why I think this is so important is that a lot of candidates don't even do this. And sometimes it's hard for them to tell whether you're still interested and whether they want to move forward and extend an offer, because if they don't get the sense that you are, then they're kind of wasting their time. So by sending them a follow-up and telling them, hey, thanks for the opportunity to talk to the team, I had a really good time chatting with them, please let me know what the next steps are, that signals to them that you're still interested and that you want to see this through. And that's also going to put a little bit of sense of urgency on them so that they can make sure to wrap up all of the panel feedback and get back to you if they're still interested. Anyways, guys, those are my 5 tips for how I was able to get a job offer from Amazon. Your mileage might vary and you guys might have a completely different experience, and that's okay. If you guys have any tips that you guys want to share, drop them in the comments down below. But this was sort of my experience going through the process, and hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Now, the question around whether I accepted the offer or not, that's still a TBD. I still haven't decided yet, and I will probably let you guys know in a future video if I do decide to take the offer, what my experience working at Amazon is like, but that will be for a future video. Anyways, guys, hopefully this video was helpful. If you want to book my time for coaching one-on-one, let me know, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.